The courtroom doors slammed shut behind Rachel Monroe, and for one suffocating second, every eye in the gallery turned toward her. "All rise," the bailiff called out, "the Honourable Judge Miriam Castellano presiding." Rachel didn't rise right away. Her legs wouldn't let her. Across the aisle, the administrator of Brightwater Senior Living sat in a charcoal suit that cost more than her mother's monthly rent at that place, flanked by two attorneys who had not once looked her in the eye since the lawsuit began. 6 months earlier, she'd received a phone call that started with the words, "Every child dreads." "Ms. Monroe, we need to inform you that your mother had a fall." That single sentence had unraveled everything Rachel thought she understood about safety, about trust, about the people her family had paid to protect Eleanor Whitfield in her final years. Now, in a courtroom in Franklin County, Ohio, Rachel was about to find out exactly how much of that phone call had been a lie. "Ms. Reyes," Judge Castellano said, addressing the plaintiff's attorney, "you may proceed with your opening statement." Sophia Reyes rose slowly. She was in her early 40s, sharp-eyed, dressed in navy, carrying the calm of someone who had already fought this battle 100 times in her head. She rested one hand on the edge of the plaintiff's table where Rachel sat. "6 months ago," Sophia began, "a 78-year-old woman named Eleanor Whitfield went to sleep in a facility her daughter paid $12,000 a month to trust. She never fully woke up the same again." A murmur passed through the gallery. "The defense will tell you this was an accident, a simple, tragic fall. That is the story Brightwater Senior Living told Rachel Monroe on the phone. It is the story they told the state investigator. It is the story written in their incident report." Sophia paused, letting the silence stretch just long enough to hurt. "But there is a security camera in that hallway, and ladies and gentlemen, cameras do not lie." Marcus Doyle, lead counsel for Brightwater, allowed the faintest flicker of a smile before it vanished. Rachel had learned in the pre-trial depositions that Doyle had defended 11 nursing facilities in the last 4 years. He had never lost. "Objection to the theatrics, Your Honor," Doyle said, standing. "Counsel is testifying, not opening." "Sustained. Ms. Reyes, keep it to the facts you intend to prove." "Yes, Your Honor." Sophia turned back to the jury. "We intend to prove that Eleanor Whitfield did not fall by accident. We intend to prove that Brightwater Senior Living knew the truth within hours and chose to bury it." Rachel's chest tightened. She thought of her mother in the memory care wing 3 weeks ago, when Rachel visited and Eleanor grabbed her wrist with more strength than a woman with a fractured hip should have had left. "He pushed me," Eleanor had whispered, "the boy with the keys. He pushed me." At the time, Rachel thought it was the dementia talking. The doctors had warned her that confusion, false memories, and paranoid statements were common after trauma and anesthesia. She hadn't believed her mother. Now she prayed she'd been wrong to doubt her. Doyle stood for his opening. He was tall, silver-templed, a man who had clearly practiced this exact walk to the jury box 1,000 times. "Ladies and gentlemen, my client operates one of the highest-rated senior care facilities in the county. Falls happen. They are, unfortunately, a documented and unavoidable risk of aging." "Mrs. Whitfield suffered from moderate cognitive decline and a documented history of unsteady gait. This is a tragedy. It is not a crime." He gestured toward Gordon Hale, the facility's administrator, seated stiffly at the defense table. Mr. Hale and his staff followed every protocol required by Ohio state law. There is no evidence, none, that anyone at Brightwater caused Mrs. Whitfield's injuries. Rachel felt Sophia's hand briefly touch her arm under the table. "Steady," the touch said. "This is only the beginning." The first witness was Gordon Hale himself. He walked to the stand with the practiced calm of a man who had rehearsed his testimony in a mirror. 52 years old, thinning hair combed carefully to hide it. A wedding ring he twisted when nervous. "Mr. Hale," Sophia began, "on the night of March 14th, what time did staff first report finding Eleanor Whitfield on the floor of the east hallway?" "According to the incident log, 2:47 a.m. "And who found her?" "A certified nursing aide, Denise Coyle." "Was Ms. Coyle assigned to Mrs. Whitfield's hallway that night?" Hale hesitated, just a half second too long. "She was covering for another aide who called in sick." "Covering," Sophia repeated. "So Brightwater was short-staffed that night." "Objection. Argumentative." "Overruled. The witness may answer." Hale's jaw tightened. "We were operating with reduced staffing, yes. It happens in the industry." "How many residents was Ms. Coyle responsible for monitoring alone that night?" "I believe 22. A soft gasp rippled through the gallery. Rachel watched 3 jurors exchange glances. 22 residents, Sophia said slowly, many with dementia, mobility issues, full risks monitored by a single aide. Is that within your own facility's safety policy, Mr. Hale? Our policy recommends a ratio of 1 to 15 during night shift. So you were nearly 50% understaffed. Yes. Sophia let that number breathe in the room before continuing. Mr. Hale, does Brightwater have security cameras in the east hallway? Hale's twisting of his wedding ring sped up. We have a camera at the nurses' station covering the corridor, yes. Did you review that footage after Mrs. Whitfield's fall? I was told the footage from that specific time period was corrupted. Corrupted, Sophia said. By whom? I don't have that information. You don't have that information, Sophia repeated, letting her disbelief show just enough. Mr. Hale, isn't it true that within 48 hours of the incident, you personally instructed your IT contractor to clean up the surveillance system? Doyle shot to his feet. Objection. Counsel is presenting facts, not in evidence. I'll rephrase, Your Honor. Sophia lifted a folder and approached the bench. Permission to introduce Plaintiff's Exhibit 14, an email obtained through discovery. Judge Castellano reviewed the document. The objection is overruled. Proceed. The email appeared on the courtroom screen, projected large enough for the entire gallery to read. From Gordon Hale to SecureView IT Solutions. Subject, East Hallway footage. Urgent. Please confirm the March 14th footage has been fully removed from the cloud backup as discussed. This needs to be handled quietly. The room went utterly silent. Rachel's hands curled into fists in her lap. 6 months of being told there was simply no video. 6 months of grief laced with the nagging feeling that something didn't add up. And here it was, in black and white, on a courtroom screen. Mr. Hale, Sophia said quietly, why did you ask your IT contractor to remove footage of the exact night my client's mother suffered a hip fracture, a concussion, and internal bleeding? Hale's face had gone pale. There were liability concerns. Standard practice after an incident is to preserve. You didn't preserve it, Mr. Hale. You deleted it. I believed it had already been backed up elsewhere, he said, his voice cracking slightly. I was told the system automatically archives to a secondary cloud server. Sophia let a small, dangerous smile cross her face. That's an interesting detail, Mr. Hale, because it happens to be true. Doyle's head snapped toward his client. Something had just gone very wrong, and Rachel watched the realization spread across his face like ice cracking underfoot. Your Honor, Sophia said. The plaintiff would like to move forward to our next witness, forensic video analyst Priya Anand, who will explain what was recovered from that secondary server. Judge Castellano nodded. We'll break for 15 minutes, then proceed. During the recess, Rachel found herself in the hallway outside the courtroom, hands shaking as she gripped a paper cup of water she couldn't bring herself to drink. Sophia found her there. They tried to delete it, Rachel whispered. They actually tried to erase what happened to her. And they didn't know Brightwater upgraded to a new insurance-mandated backup system 2 months before your mother's fall, Sophia said. Hale didn't even know it existed. Corporate installed it without training the local staff properly. It's the reason we're standing here today instead of settling for a number and a gag order. Is it bad? Rachel asked. The footage? Sophia's expression didn't change, but her eyes softened. Rachel, I need you to be ready for what's on it. It's better you hear it from me first, not on that screen in front of a jury. Rachel's stomach dropped. Tell me. Sophia glanced down the hallway to make sure they were alone. It wasn't a fall. Back inside, the gallery filled again. Priya Anand took the stand, laptop bag over her shoulder, a forensic video analyst with 15 years of experience testifying in negligence and abuse cases across 3 states. Ms. Anand, Sophia said, were you able to recover footage from Brightwater's secondary cloud backup system for the night of March 14th? Yes. The footage is time-stamped, unedited, and forensically verified as authentic. I can confirm no tampering occurred on this specific file. Your Honor, the plaintiff requests to play Exhibit 22 for the jury. Mr. Doyle? Doyle stood, visibly rattled. We renew our prior objection regarding chain of custody, Your Honor, but understand the court has already ruled. Noted and overruled again. You may proceed, Ms. Reyes. The lights dimmed. The screen flickered to life. The timestamp read, 2:31 a.m., March 14th. The hallway was quiet, lit by the soft glow of night shift lighting. Eleanor Whitfield's frail figure appeared at the edge of the frame, moving slowly with her walker toward the nurse's station, her nightgown pale against the dim corridor. A young man in scrubs appeared from a supply closet. Rachel's breath caught. She recognized him barely. Curtis Vance, one of the orderlies who had smiled at her during visiting hours, who had once complimented her mother's handwriting on a get-well card. On the screen, Eleanor seemed to be gesturing at him, agitated. Her mouth moved rapidly, though there was no audio. Can we get lip-reading analysis on this segment, Your Honor? Sophia asked. We have a certified expert prepared to testify to what was said, if the court permits. We'll allow it later in testimony. Continue playing. On the screen, Curtis Vance's posture shifted. He stepped toward Eleanor. She backed away, gripping her walker. Then his hand shot out. Not a gentle correction, not a supportive touch, but a hard shove to her shoulder. Eleanor crumpled backward, her walker clattering sideways, her body striking the tile floor with a force that made several jurors flinch visibly. Curtis Vance stood over her for 3 full seconds. Then he looked both directions down the hallway, stepped over her, and walked away. He did not call for help. He did not check if she was breathing. He simply walked away and disappeared around the corner. The video kept running. 9 minutes and 40 seconds past 9 minutes and 40 seconds, where Eleanor Whitfield lay motionless on the cold floor, alone, before Denise Coyle finally rounded the corner and rushed to her side. The lights came back up. Nobody in the gallery spoke. Rachel was crying, silent, her hand pressed hard against her mouth. She had spent 6 months telling herself her mother's words were confusion, delusion. a trauma-addled mind grasping for a story that made sense of an unbearable injury. Her mother had been telling the truth the entire time. "Ms. Anand," Sophia said gently, her own voice tighter than before. "Can you confirm the identity of the individual on screen?" "Yes." Facility badge access logs confirm the individual entering and exiting that hallway at those exact timestamps was employee Curtis Vance, orderly, night shift. "And is Mr. Vance currently employed at Brightwater Senior Living?" Doyle stood quickly. "Your Honor, that question is beyond this witness's scope." "Sustained. But I suspect counsel will revisit that question with a more appropriate witness." Sophia nodded. No further questions. Doyle's cross-examination of Priya Anand was brief and careful, focused entirely on technical chain of custody questions, clearly trying to create doubt around the footage's authenticity. But the damage to the defense's narrative was already permanent. Every juror in that box had watched an old woman be shoved to the ground and left to lie there for nearly 10 minutes. Then, just as Judge Castellano reached for her gavel to end the day's session, Doyle rose one final time. "Your Honor, the defense moves to strike Exhibit 22 from the record in its entirety and requests a curative instruction directing the jury to disregard the footage." Sophia was on her feet instantly. "Your Honor, this exhibit has already been admitted and shown." "On what grounds, Mr. Doyle?" the judge asked. "Newly discovered evidence, Your Honor, that the secondary backup server in question was serviced by a third-party contractor 11 days after Mrs. Whitfield's fall, a fact not disclosed during discovery. The defense submits that this creates a reasonable question as to whether the file could have been altered before recovery." A ripple of alarm went through the gallery. Rachel's stomach turned over. Beside her, Sophia's expression didn't crack, but her pen stopped moving against her legal pad. "That is a serious allegation, Mr. Doyle," Judge Castellano said. "I'm not striking a properly authenticated exhibit on the word of counsel alone at 4:15 on a Thursday afternoon. Ms. Reyes, I want your forensic expert prepared to address the servicing record first thing tomorrow morning. Until then, the exhibit remains part of the record, but I will hear further argument before this trial proceeds." "Understood, Your Honor," Sophia said evenly. The gavel came down. Court was adjourned. Rachel grabbed Sophia's arm the moment they were in the hallway. "Can they actually do that? Can they throw it out after everyone already saw it?" "If the judge believes there's a real question about the file's integrity, she can instruct the jury to disregard it," Sophia said. "And juries don't always listen to instructions like that. But sometimes they do. This is the fight for tonight." Sophia and Priya Anand spent the night combing through the service contractor's maintenance logs. By 6 the following morning, they had their answer. The 11-day service call had touched only the facility's front gate camera system, an entirely separate server with no access to the East Hallway archive. Doyle's newly discovered evidence turned out to be a clerical footnote, stretched into a last-ditch attempt to manufacture doubt. When court resumed, Priya Anand walked the judge through server architecture diagrams and access logs, proving the two systems had never been connected. Judge Castellano listened in silence, then ruled from the bench. "The court finds no credible basis to question the authenticity of Exhibit 22. The defense's motion is denied. The exhibit remains in evidence, and the jury's recollection of it stands unaltered." Doyle sat down without a word. Whatever ground he'd hoped to reclaim overnight was gone, and this time it looked like he knew it. When court adjourned for the day, reporters swarmed the courthouse steps. Rachel pushed past them without a word, Sophia's hand firm on her shoulder, guiding her toward the parking garage. "Tomorrow," Sophia said quietly once they were alone, We call Denise Coyle. And Rachel, she's terrified. I need you to understand that before you hear her testimony. Something happened to her after that night. Something that kept her quiet for months. What do you mean? Sophia's face was grim. I mean, I think there's more than one fall in that facility's history, and I think Denise Coyle knows exactly how many. The next morning, the courtroom felt different. Word had spread overnight. A local news segment had aired footage of the courthouse steps, and the gallery was packed twice as full. Rachel noticed unfamiliar faces scattered among the seats. An older man in a flannel jacket clutching a photograph. A woman about Rachel's age holding tissues. A teenager sitting beside an elderly man in a wheelchair. Sophia had warned her this might happen. Other families, watching, waiting to see if the truth would finally come out. The plaintiff calls Denise Coyle. Denise walked to the stand like someone approaching a ledge. Late 20s, exhausted eyes, a nervous habit of tucking her hair behind her ear over and over. She'd resigned from Brightwater 2 months after the incident. Ms. Coyle, Sophia said gently, can you describe what you saw when you found Mrs. Whitfield on the floor? She was unconscious. There was blood near her head. Her hip was at a wrong angle. Denise's voice wavered. I called for help immediately. I started basic first aid. I didn't know how long she'd been there. Did you report what you found to your supervisor? Yes, immediately. And what were you told to write in the incident report? Denise's eyes flicked toward the defense table, toward Gordon Hale. Toward, Rachel realized with a chill, someone else entirely a man sitting 3 rows back in the gallery, whom Rachel didn't recognize. Ms. Coyle, Judge Castellano said, not unkindly, please answer the question. I was told to write that I found her on the floor, and it appeared to be an unwitnessed fall, Denise said. That's the phrase they used, unwitnessed fall. Did you believe that phrase was accurate? No. Denise's voice cracked. I didn't see what happened, but I knew. Mrs. Whitfield told me herself, before she lost consciousness in the ambulance. She said a name. The courtroom leaned forward as one. What name did she say, Miss Coyle? Curtis. Denise's hands trembled on the rail of the witness stand. She said, Curtis pushed me. I saw him with the pills. The pills? Sophia repeated carefully. Did you understand what that meant at the time? Not right away. But 3 weeks earlier, I'd noticed discrepancies in the medication cart logs on nights Curtis worked alone. Missing doses of lorazepam, missing oxycodone from 2 residents' charts. I reported it to my shift supervisor. Nothing happened. Who was your shift supervisor? Denise's eyes flicked again toward the gallery, toward the unfamiliar man in the 3rd row. Trevor Banks, the head night nurse. Is Mr. Banks in the courtroom today? Yes. Denise pointed, her hand shaking visibly. He's sitting right there. Every head in the gallery turned. The man in the 3rd row, mid-40s, jaw clenched, eyes locked somewhere on the floor, did not move. Your Honor, Sophia said, the plaintiff intends to call Trevor Banks as a hostile witness this afternoon. Doyle was on his feet immediately, whispering urgently to Gordon Hale, who looked as though the floor had opened beneath him. Ms. Coyle, Sophia continued, after you reported the medication discrepancies to Mr. Banks, what happened to you professionally? I was written up, twice, for unrelated minor things, being 4 minutes late, using my phone during a break, things other staff did constantly without consequence. I felt like I was being pushed out. And after Mrs. Whitfield's fall, after you told administration what she said about Curtis, what happened then? Denise's composure finally broke. Tears slid down her face. I got a call. 2 nights after the incident. A man's voice. I didn't recognize it. He said, "You didn't see anything. Remember that, or you'll be the one who falls next." The gallery erupted into murmurs. Judge Castellano banged her gavel once. Order. Order in the court. Rachel's chest ached with a fury she hadn't let herself feel until this moment. Not just grief for her mother, but rage for this young woman who had tried to speak the truth and been threatened into silence. "Did you report that phone call to police?" Sophia asked once the room quieted. "I was scared," Denise whispered. "I have a 4-year-old daughter. I didn't know who to trust. I quit 2 weeks later and I've been terrified ever since that testifying today would put my family in danger." "Why are you testifying today, Ms. Coyle?" Denise looked up, past Sophia, directly at Rachel for the first time. Her voice steadied. "Because Mrs. Whitfield never got to finish her sentence in that ambulance." She started to say something else, right before she lost consciousness. "I've carried it for 6 months, and I can't carry it anymore." What did she say? She said, "Tell my daughter." I always believed her. I think she meant she believed Rachel would fight for her. I think she knew, somehow, that this day would come. Rachel pressed her hand against her mouth, unable to hold back a sob. Sophia gave the jury a long moment before continuing. "No further questions, Your Honor." Doyle's cross-examination attempted to paint Denise as a disgruntled former employee with an axe to grind, but his questions felt hollow against the emotional weight of what the jury had just witnessed. By the time Denise stepped down, 3 jurors were visibly wiping their eyes. The afternoon session began with a courtroom so tense it felt combustible. The plaintiff calls Trevor Banks. Banks approached the stand slowly, a man clearly calculating every step he could still control. Sophia didn't waste time on pleasantries. "Mr. Banks, you were the supervising night nurse at Brightwater on March 14th. "Yes." "Did Denise Coyle report medication discrepancies to you in the weeks before Mrs. Whitfield's fall?" Banks's attorney Doyle had arranged separate counsel for him, a signal that told Rachel the defense's alliance was already fracturing, leaned toward his client and whispered something. "I don't recall specific reports," Banks said carefully. "You don't recall," Sophia repeated. "Mr. Banks, isn't it true that Brightwater's own internal audit system flagged Curtis Vance's medication access logs for irregular patterns 4 separate times in the 2 months before Mrs. Whitfield's injury?" "I would have to see the documentation." "Let's look at it together then." Sophia produced another exhibit. Plaintiff's Exhibit 31, an internal compliance email dated 6 weeks before the incident, addressed to you directly, flagging Curtis Vance's access to the medication cart on nights he wasn't authorized to administer scheduled narcotics. The email appeared on screen. Banks's face tightened. "Did you investigate this flag, Mr. Banks?" "I spoke to Curtis about it." "And what did he tell you?" "He said there'd been a scheduling mix-up, that he was covering for another nurse's login." "Did you verify that claim?" Silence. "Mr. Banks, did you verify that claim?" "No," Banks said finally, quietly. "I didn't." "Why not?" Banks's jaw worked for a long moment. Curtis was Gordon Hale's nephew. The courtroom went dead silent. Rachel felt the blood drain from her face. Beside her, Sophia's expression didn't change, but her hand tightened almost imperceptibly on the edge of the table. The sign, Rachel had learned over the past weeks, that meant they'd just found exactly what they were looking for. "Say that again for the record, Mr. Banks." "Curtis Vance is Gordon Hale's nephew," Banks repeated, louder this time, as if saying it once had broken something loose in him. I was told unofficially to handle any issues with him quietly, internally, not through the formal disciplinary channel. Told by whom? By Mr. Hale directly. Every eye in the courtroom shifted to Gordon Hale, who sat frozen at the defense table, his face the color of ash. "Your Honor," Doyle said, standing on unsteady legs, "may we have a brief recess?" "We're in the middle of testimony, Mr. Doyle. Your request is denied. Ms. Reyes, continue." "Mr. Banks, after Mrs. Whitfield's fall, were you instructed to write the incident report in a specific way?" "Yes. I was told to write unwitnessed fall, cause unknown, resident found on floor by staff. I was told not to mention Curtis's name anywhere in the documentation, even though I already suspected after what Denise told me that he was involved." "And the threatening phone call Ms. Coyle received. Do you know anything about that?" Banks hesitated, longer this time. His attorney shook his head almost imperceptibly in a silent warning. Banks ignored it. "I made that call," he said. His voice was barely audible. "Gordon told me to. He said if this got out, the facility would lose its license, 40 people would lose their jobs, and it would destroy the Hale family's reputation in this town. I told myself I was protecting people's livelihoods. I told myself it was a grey area." He looked toward Rachel for the first time, his composure crumbling. "It wasn't a grey area. I threatened a young mother to protect a man who hurt a defenseless woman. I've had to live with that every single day since." Rachel didn't know whether to feel triumphant or sick. Both feelings crashed into her at once. "No further questions, Your Honor," Sophia said quietly. Judge Castellano called a 15-minute recess before cross-examination, and even Doyle looked as though he needed it. When court resumed, his cross of Banks was short. Clearly damage control rather than defense. The final witness of the day was the one Rachel had been dreading and hoping for in equal measure. The plaintiff calls Curtis Vance. Vance had been under subpoena since the second week of the trial, and he entered now flanked by his own separate criminal defense attorney who had already advised him, publicly on record, to invoke his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination, given the strong likelihood that the footage and testimony already entered into evidence would trigger criminal charges the moment this trial concluded. He sat down stiffly, refusing to meet Rachel's eyes. "Mr. Vance," Sophia began, "on the night of March 14th, did you strike or push Eleanor Whitfield in the east hallway of Brightwater Senior Living?" "On the advice of my attorney, I invoke my Fifth Amendment right." "Did you divert prescription medications belonging to residents under your care?" "I invoke my Fifth Amendment right." "Did your uncle, Gordon Hale, instruct staff to conceal your involvement in Mrs. Whitfield's injuries?" "I invoke my Fifth Amendment right." Sophia let each refusal sit in the air, unchallenged, undeniable in its own silence. In a civil trial, the jury was permitted to draw a negative inference from a witness's refusal to answer, and every juror's face told Rachel they understood exactly what that silence meant. "No further questions, Your Honor," Sophia said. "The plaintiff rests." That night, Rachel sat beside her mother's hospital bed at the rehabilitation facility where Eleanor had been transferred after the lawsuit began. Eleanor's hip had healed mostly, though she would never walk without a cane again. Her mind drifted in and out these days, some hours sharp and clear, others lost in fog. Tonight, her eyes were clear. "They played the video today, Mama," Rachel said softly, holding her mother's hand. "Everyone saw it. Everyone knows you were telling the truth." Eleanor turned her head slowly, her eyes pale blue and tired, filled with tears. "I told you," she whispered. "I told you, and you looked at me like I was losing my mind." Rachel's throat closed. I know, Mama. I'm so sorry. I should have believed you from the very first day. You believe me now, Eleanor said, squeezing her hand with surprising strength. That's what matters. That's all that ever mattered. Closing arguments began 3 days later. Doyle stood first, his usual polish dulled by the accumulated damage of the trial. He tried valiantly to separate Brightwater the corporation from Gordon Hale and Curtis Vance the individuals, arguing the company itself had strong policies that were circumvented by a few bad actors. This is not a story about a broken system, Doyle told the jury. It is a story about two men who broke the rules that were designed to protect people like Eleanor Whitfield. Punish them. Don't punish the hundreds of caregivers at Brightwater who do their jobs with integrity every single day. It was, Rachel had to admit, a smarter argument than she expected. But it came far too late. Sophia rose for the plaintiff's closing, and for the first time in the entire trial, she walked out from behind the table entirely, standing close to the jury box, her voice quiet enough that the room had to lean in to hear it. Gordon Hale didn't break the rules by accident, she said. He broke them on purpose, to protect his nephew, and when that wasn't enough, he tried to erase the evidence entirely. He would have succeeded, if not for a backup server he didn't even know existed. Think about that. The truth in this case survived by pure chance. She turned, gesturing toward Rachel. Eleanor Whitfield told her daughter what happened to her, in the clearest moment of clarity she had left. And her daughter didn't believe her not because Rachel didn't love her mother, but because a corporation had already built a story designed to make a grieving family doubt the truth. That is what negligence like this does. It doesn't just break bones, it breaks trust between mothers and daughters in the last years they have left together. Several jurors were crying openly now. You have the power today to tell every nursing home in this state that quietly deleting a video, quietly threatening a witness, quietly protecting a nephew over a resident's safety, that none of that will ever be quiet again. Not in this courtroom. Not while people are watching. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Rachel spent them pacing the courthouse hallway, unable to eat, unable to sit still. Sophia beside her the entire time, saying little, simply present. When the bailiff finally called them back inside, Rachel felt as though her heart might stop before the verdict was even read. Has the jury reached a verdict? Judge Castellano asked. The jury foreperson, a woman in her 60s with silver hair and steady eyes, stood. We have, Your Honor. On the count of negligence against Brightwater Senior Living, how do you find? We find in favor of the plaintiff. On the count of negligent supervision against Gordon Hale, individually, how do you find? We find in favor of the plaintiff. On the count of battery and elder abuse against Curtis Vance, how do you find? We find in favor of the plaintiff. The gallery erupted, quickly silenced by the judge's gavel. Rachel felt Sophia's hand grip hers tightly under the table, and for the first time in 6 months, Rachel let herself breathe all the way out. In accordance with the jury's finding, Judge Castellano continued, the court awards compensatory damages in the amount of $2,400,000 and punitive damages in the amount of $5 million against Brightwater Senior Living and its administrator, reflecting the court's recognition of the deliberate concealment of evidence in this case. Rachel didn't hear the exact number register in her mind as anything but noise. Money had never been the point. What mattered was the sentence Judge Castellano spoke next, looking directly at Gordon Hale. This court is also referring this matter to the Ohio Department of Health and the County Prosecutor's Office for further investigation into potential criminal charges, including obstruction of justice, tampering with evidence, and witness intimidation. Gordon Hale's face went white. Beside him, Doyle simply closed his folder, the fight finally gone out of him. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed again, but this time, Rachel didn't push past them. She stopped on the top step, sunlight breaking through the grey Ohio sky for the first time in days, and she spoke. "My mother spent 60 years raising 4 children, working 2 jobs, and never once asking anyone for help," Rachel said, her voice steady despite the tears on her face. When she finally needed help, she was shoved to the ground and left on a cold floor for almost 10 minutes by someone who was supposed to protect her. And then she was called a liar for telling the truth. She paused, looking directly into the nearest camera. If your gut tells you something is wrong in how a loved one is being cared for, believe them. Ask questions, demand the footage, because somewhere out there, right now, there's another Eleanor Whitfield and another Denise Coyle too scared to speak up. This verdict is for both of them. 3 weeks later, Rachel's phone buzzed with a text from Sophia at 7 in the morning. She sat up in bed and read it twice before she believed it. 2 black and white police cars, parked outside a modest brick house on the edge of town, red and blue light sweeping silently across the front lawn. Curtis Vance was led out in handcuffs, his mother sobbing on the porch behind him. A single line beneath the photo. Charged. Felonious assault, elder abuse, tampering with evidence. Rachel set the phone down on the kitchen counter and let herself cry for the first time in weeks, not from grief this time, but from something closer to relief. Gordon Hale's resignation letter appeared in the local paper 8 days later, 4 sentences long, mentioning nothing about Eleanor Whitfield by name. Rachel read it standing in a grocery store checkout line, and found she felt nothing at all. No triumph, no anger, just the quiet, exhausted stillness of a fight, finally over. On a grey Tuesday afternoon in November, Denise Coyle knocked on the door of Eleanor's rehabilitation room, a small bouquet of grocery store daisies in her hand. She sat with Eleanor for nearly an hour, mostly in comfortable silence, Eleanor's papery hand resting inside both of Denise's. Before she left, Denise leaned down and whispered something Rachel couldn't quite hear. Eleanor smiled the widest smile Rachel had seen from her in months. The following spring, Rachel found a different place, Willow Creek family home, 6 residents, a wraparound porch, and an owner named Pat who answered her phone personally, day or night. Cameras lined every hallway, streaming live to an app on Rachel's phone. The first night Rachel installed it, she sat on her own couch at 11 p.m., simply watching her mother sleep peacefully on the small, glowing screen, and finally, for the first time in over a year, she let herself close her eyes and rest too. On quiet evenings now, Rachel sits beside her mother's chair by the window, watching the sun go down over a garden Eleanor helped plant herself. And every so often, her mother reaches over, takes her hand, and says the same 4 words she said the day the truth finally came out. "You believe me now?" And every single time, Rachel answers the same way. "I will always believe you, Mama, for the rest of your life and for the rest of mine."